Lighthouse Baptist Church for Sunday school. It's good to see the Chaussées here. Did I say that right? Close? Close? 90? Is it? Okay. Chaussées? Okay. This guy's saying it's Chaussées, so Chaussées. Yeah, it's really good to see everybody. Missed a lot of church recently. Not happy about that. I'm the laziest person here, I think, and I'm usually happy to not come to church because I'm lazy and I like to just be lazy, and that makes my flesh happy. And it's definitely not, doesn't make me happy in the long run, right? But your flesh wants what it wants now. It's like that child stuff. But I am very happy to be here today. I have been missing church. Last Sunday, I wasn't here because I needed to go see my dad. My brother called me, and my brother's a mechanic, and he said that this is, I don't know, the 30th anniversary of when we went camping in the winter up to my uncle's cabin. Okay, this is in the mountains of Fairfield, so this is not, this is mountains, this is snow. Using the World War II snow tractor my dad had. So he'd gotten the snow tractor and gotten it running and stuff, and crammed all of us male children in there. There was only one sister, and she was older. And I always kind of wondered why we did that, because when you're a parent that has a bunch of kids, you don't really do anything much because, hey, this would be fun, because it never is. It's exhausting. Sometimes it's fun, but the fun versus work is kind of unbalanced. So, my dad, he had a stroke recently, and so he was trying to do something, and so he sent a letter, and I never knew why we did this, but the letter contained the story he wrote a long time ago for a magazine. And the reason was he knew we would all go insane if we stayed in the house because the weather was so bad. There was nothing to do. We all had cabin fever, and he loved my mom, so he got all of us male children out of the house and took us up into the mountains, and we did fun things like shoveled off a roof and stuff like that. But you know what? It was great. It was one of the best memories I have. We actually, right before we got to my uncle's cabin, the snow tractor fell into a part of a creek bed. We couldn't see where the creek was, and it kind of fell in there. We're just sitting like this, and Dad's like, "Okay, guys, Uncle Claude's cabin is up there. You guys just go up there." And Curtis was always the big helper of my dad. He's a few years older than me. Curtis had a snow machine, and they shoveled and did all this stuff until they could get it out. And anyway. So, long story longer, that's why we went up and took pictures, which turned out to be, we barely were able to do it just because of some of the issues with my dad. And so this message is really, it's not on Proverbs today. It actually relates to Job. So if you want to open your Bibles to Job, that is where I will be talking. Titus, were you unable to find it? Do you have a Bible you could loan me? Somehow I misplaced my Bible. I have a digital one I use. I always have a Bible with me, but when I teach, I definitely like to have one. So, thank you, Daniel. So, and why Job? Well, for anybody who knows, when you have a stroke, sometimes you don't recover all the way. And sometimes it takes forever. Sometimes you never get it back. I hadn't had a lot of communication with my dad because he won't talk on the phone. He won't really go out of the house. He won't go to church. basically won't interact with people and other than his family. So it's challenging. I think everybody here knows the basics of Job, but I'll try to recap it because I want us all to start from some sort of baseline. Job was a good man, and I always found the book of Job to be very depressing because it's pretty long, and basically it talks about this poor guy who didn't do anything wrong, and he lost his family, he lost all his wealth, and then he lost his health as well, and he's just sitting there suffering. And he could, there was a little bit of the woe is me, but for the most part, he didn't sin. He didn't curse God and die, which is what his wife wanted him to do. I mean, Job lost, in his mind, everything. But he didn't really lose everything. And so and I apologize for the scatteredness of this. It really was something I kind of developed at the last minute. If that's too bad, I'll just go back to Proverbs. But I've really been contemplating my dad, who has been a godly man and has always had more faith than me and been stronger than me, and how he is miserable, he says. And I'm trying to figure out, are you in pain? I mean, I know you can't do everything you used to do, but his right hand, his arm, but his hand, from here down, he doesn't have control over it. He can't talk very well. He can't type on the keyboard, even one-handed. So he can't do the things he loved to do, which was working on mechanical stuff, building stuff. He can't use his creative part because he can't type or write. He can work the printer so he can find old articles and print them off. But if he wants to create new things, he has to get Mom, which is, Mom loves him and will help him. And, but it's hard. It's hard for him. It's hard for her. So he is struggling, and he says he's miserable. And so he knows about Job. Well, everybody knows about Job. So I've been pondering why do we get that way? I mean, we're Christians, right? Why do we get miserable? Why do we get unhappy? I have a resting state of just being generally discontent. That's just kind of me naturally. I have to work to get up to, kind of normal happiness. It's an effort every day to not be a grump. I call myself Grumpy Grant because, that's my natural state. But I have lots to be thankful for, and I can go down the list, okay? Job had lost all these things, but he still had some stuff, right? But I think the real reason that we do this to ourselves is we don't understand why things happen. My dad is ready to die, he told me. It's like, okay, I think 2023 might be my last year. He wasn't ready to die when I talked to him 10 or so years ago when he first had some heart issues. I was like, Dad, you've got this estate here. This is going to destroy the family, if you don't do something about this. When people die, the beneficiaries and whatnot turn into monsters, right? They all want that piece, their piece of the pie, even though they don't really deserve or they're not entitled to anything. So, I mean, my family's, I think they're all saved, but, it can still degenerate into something horrible. But he said, I'm not ready to die. And getting everything ship-shape and whatnot. Although he did spend a lot of time trying to organize some things. After that, he wasn't ready to die. So he's ready to die now. And boy, doesn't God have a sense of humor, right? Instead of just letting the poor guy die, he just cripples him. And he takes away everything he loves. And that's one way of looking at it. I mean, Job certainly had some feelings like that. For the most part, he was really good, though. He said, naked, God giveth, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job knew there was a reason, but he didn't know what it was. And then he still had his friends who came from a long ways away. Took him a long time to get there, but then he regretted that they ever showed up. I mean, one of my favorite lines from the book of Job is, "Miserable comforters are ye all." I mean, that's the kind of friends they were. And there's multiple times when he admonishes his friends. But I mean, he did still have them. He had his wife, and that normally should be something to be grateful for, but she definitely wasn't on his side. She had lost her family. And she, like everybody else, was blaming Job. But Job didn't do anything. My dad didn't do anything to get a stroke. But God has a reason. And I think that where we as Christians really shoot ourselves in the foot is when we demand to know what that reason is. God didn't tell Job what the reason was. I mean, at the end, there's some clues, but he never said, you are going to be written about and then read about for thousands of years. And every other suffering Christian, and even some non-Christians, will look to you as an example and see how you did really well and you had faith. When we ask ourselves why, I mean, I was thinking, well, it's obvious that God doesn't like you, right? I mean, why would he make you go through a horrible trial? He doesn't like Jimmy. And he wants Jimmy to suffer, right? I mean, either that or Jimmy's done something horribly wrong. I mean, he's a sinner. That's what Job's friends were saying. He's brought this on himself. Well, when I was up at Fairfield, they're not an independent Baptist church like we are, and their preaching has not always been the greatest, in my most humble opinion. But they have a newer pastor, and I thought the message was pretty decent. And one of the questions he asked was, why does stuff like this happen? And, well, I know the answer, right? And he says, there's 3 reasons. I'm like, huh? 3 reasons? And he says, sin. I'm like, okay. And then the second reason was sin, and the third reason was sin. But, different aspects of sin. So it boils down to sin. Bad things happen to good people because of sin. And that's hard for our human brains to accept. If a child dies, something I heard about, that my employer, and this has nothing to do with them or their fault, they had an employee starve their child to death. This was during COVID. You starved your child to death. What did that child do? It's horrible. And we want to understand that, and we can't. We can't understand that. We can't understand what purpose God has there. But for me, I look at it like, do we have free will or do we not have free will? And I do not think there's like this, when you have sin and you have free will, that enables people to do horrible things to other people. If you want God to stop everything, then we have no sin. And we will eventually get to a point where it'll be like that. I mean, but right now we have sin, and therefore horrible things happen. Is this God's fault? Is God doing the horrible things? No, but he's allowing bad things to happen. I mean, that's what happens in Job. Satan goes to Job, or to God, and then God allows Satan to do these things to him. Now, as a Christian, God's only going to let things happen to us for a good reason. But we should be able to trust God. And honestly, that's where I think we really need to look deep inside of ourselves. My sister is going to say, look, Dad, and I get this logic. That's the way I felt too. Yeah, this is unfortunate. You've lost a lot. But you still have the ability to move around, and you can still communicate. And you know what? Some people have life worse than you. They've had horrible, horrible trials that are worse than what you're going through right now. But here's the thing. Telling somebody that doesn't matter. Because they don't care about other people. In that moment, in that time, nobody exists outside of them. Because they're suffering. So although it's true, I don't know that you can effectively get to somebody who is so, navel-gazing. They're so focused on themselves, they just don't want to hear it. The thing that I ask myself is, and I'm probably getting ahead a bit too much, but when bad things happen, we really have two choices. We can focus on what we've lost, or we can focus on what we still have. We can focus on the fact that Job lost his family and all these things, his wealth, his position, his health. My dad can focus on the fact that he lost his ability to communicate effectively. He was a teacher. He loved to teach. He loves to tell stories. He can focus on that and the fact he can't wrench anymore. Not that he's ever used that term. Or he can focus on what he still has. So, what could Job thank God for? Job seemingly lost everything. Number one, Job was saved. Job knew he had a Redeemer. I'm preaching this message to myself more than anything. I don't expect my dad to listen to this. He could be watching right now, but I don't think he is. I don't think he's ever watched any of our services. I told my mom about it. But I want to be able to, when I'm going through something horrible, because guess what? It's coming. I want to be able to not fall like my dad did. I've never seen him fall spiritually before. I've never seen him weep before. It's very difficult, Guys don't like to deal with emotions because you know what? They make us feel funny. We're not comfortable with them. It's not that we don't have them. We do, but we will try to avoid them. And God, I think, made us that way for a very good reason. There's things like, combat and whatnot that men have to go do. And I think it's only by the compartmentalization ability that God has given men that they are able to affect and do the things that God has put forth for them. So I don't like to deal with this stuff, but I want to be able to, when I hit a really hard trial, when I have something really bad, and I've had some pretty bad ones. I told my dad, I said, at the age of 30, I lost the ability to not use my hands, but I couldn't do what I enjoyed. At the age of 30, so 17 years ago, I lost the ability to type, use a mouse, read a book. Could my fingers not move? No, it wasn't that bad. It just gave me a lot of pain. I had burning. I had burning up and down my arm. My wrists hurt so bad. I'd just kind of be like this, and I'd massage them, and still to this day, don't fully understand why it happened like this, but I was facing not being able to take care of my family. I don't remember how many kids I had, at least 4. What do you do? All I've known is being able to do technical work. How do you work without a computer or without being able to use your hands? I love to read, I can't read. Play video games, can't play video games. It was a very hard time. But God gave me grace. He gave me mercy drops. And I was able to limp along in my job. And one thing that helped was taking a lot of breaks. But this took months. It took years before I finally figured out basically the long-term solution. But no doctor helped me on this. God helped me. I learned at that time, you can't put your faith in doctors. There's a difference between putting your faith in doctors and putting your faith in men, because you can still go see the doctor and take medicine, but I don't put faith in the medicine to fix whatever ails me. I'm putting faith in God, because when that medicine fails to fix my problem, I'm devastated. But if I have faith in God, then when that medicine fails to fix the problem, I just go, well, I guess we need to, try again, keep praying. Doesn't mean I'm not disappointed. Nobody likes to suffer, right? But I want to be able to look back and always say what God has done for me. And then look forward and say, you know what? I don't understand, but that's okay. I don't have to. I don't have to because I trust God. It's that simple. And maybe somebody takes everything from me as far as family, health, wealth, possessions, everything. I'm arrested, I'm in prison, I'm being tortured. They can't take my salvation away from me. They can take everything away, but they can't take that. And they also can't take away what is in the past, the things that God has done for me that I can be thankful for. We've had a few tragedies in this church that we've either been a part of or been very close to. Pastor McComb dying was a big tragedy. Guy came here when we needed him. And we'd only had pastors for about 2 years. Not counting Pastor Keaton, who established the church. But once he established the church and got a new pastor, he went off to plant another church. And Pastor McComb was committed to the church. And you can look at it and say, well, God gave him lung cancer and killed him. Well, God had a reason for that. Do I know the entire reason? No, but extrapolating, we're in the future now. Our church is still going. It's stronger. It's bigger. I don't know the entire reason, but I don't need to know. I know that God had plans for this church, and, although it's tragic to say, Pastor McComb's death increased my faith because I saw God, he wasn't the center of the church. We kept going. And, but some of the other things, there's people, there's, I'm spacing. People who, a guy who had all these kids in Montana, missionary church, his wife died of breast cancer. Well, that hits close to home for me. My grandma, or mother grandma, grandma-in-law, Rebecca's grandma had breast cancer and had mastectomy. I am concerned about that with my wife. She doesn't like to go to the doctor any more than guys do. So that's, and her nickname as a kid was Sitting Bull. Can't make her do anything. So, so trying to nag her into going to get a mammogram is not very productive. But remember, Kelly, you, I hope remember the gentleman who came over here from Nampa on Sunday nights? No, the other one. Steve Corman. I knew his first name was Steve. Steve Corman. I think he and his wife were married like 8 years. That was all. And they met late in life. I think he was from out of state, I think. Yeah. And, you know, these two people who wanted, yeah. And anyway, they met and they got married, and he got ordained, and he came over here and he helped out, and that was a big deal. That was a big deal. And then he had a stroke. I don't know how old he was, but he wasn't that old. He had a stroke, and it didn't kill him, but he was recovering, he seemed to be, and he was in rehabilitation, and then he had another stroke, and he died. I'm like, that would be so hard to know, to have been married for just 8 years. You finally find somebody that you love, and you get married, and you know he moves across the country, and 8 years later, he dies. And I remember thinking at the time, I hope she's thankful for the time she did have. Because she could be angry. Hey, God, is this a joke to you? I mean, I get a husband, and then you take him from me? Obviously, that's not what she should do. Well, she can be thankful for the 8 years she had. So when you've lost everything, or in your mind you've lost everything, you can always think back to how God has blessed you. For the good times that he has given you, because he didn't have to give you those. We are not entitled to anything other than the gift of salvation if we believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. I mean, that is a guarantee. But although there are some promises in the Bible, we're not entitled. We're not entitled to a happy life. We're not entitled to peace and prosperity. You know, even in the Constitution, we get the right to pursue happiness. We don't get the right to happiness. Job had lost almost everything. And in some ways, he had lost every earthly thing, because even though he still had his wife, it didn't feel like he had his wife, because she said to curse God and die. It's my belief that she didn't think that God would strike him down. It's that she thought that he should kill himself. God doesn't strike people down usually when they curse him. If that was the case, we'd have people dying all over the place. We're children. We're God's children. Do our children understand everything we do? No. Baby Kelly certainly doesn't. He's a good little kid. He doesn't understand sometimes. And certainly don't understand why they got spanked or why things that were funny aren't funny anymore. Why things change, why things that are acceptable when you're 1 aren't acceptable when you're 2, and you know, we don't understand sometimes. Children don't understand why their dad has to leave them and go deploy to Iraq. They don't get it. They don't understand that their dad still loves them, but he has to go do something. But we're children. And so even we don't understand. God does. So if and when I get in this situation, like my dad is in, I want you to just ask me, do you trust God? Because if you don't, okay, I get why you're acting like a little baby. And you're throwing a fit, and you're mad at God. I get it, because you don't trust him. You don't trust him to get you out of this problem, get you through this. And you know what? You might suffer for the rest of your life. But do you trust God that he knows what he's doing? That he's the potter and you're the clay. And if you do trust God, then maybe you should stop having a pity party. Maybe you should use what you have left. I told my dad, and I did this in a loving way, I said, you can still pray. As long as you've got your mind, and his mind or his brain might be broken so he can't speak, well, he doesn't have to speak to pray. He's got his intelligence. He can pray. He could become a prayer warrior. And for all I know, that's what God wants him to be. I'm thankful for the people here that are retired, who do not have a job. You know, a 8 to 5 type job. Not to say you're not working. I'm really thankful for them, because it's people, those are the people that God usually uses as prayer warriors. It's my belief. I think there are exceptions. But they've got more time. They've got fewer distractions. They can focus. They can have that effectual, fervent prayer. You know, I get the prayer messages. I don't mute the channel for that. I do mute the fellowship, no offense. It's just too noisy for me. I look at it, except when pastor's talking about his food. I'm like, you know what? Just teasing. I'm impressed what Miss Maska does. It makes the stuff look really good. But honestly, I'm really focused a lot of times when my phone's beeping. And if it penetrates my brain to the point that I realize it's a prayer message, I'll look at it and I will pray. But I have an obligation to my employer to work. So I pray, I try to get, prayer up to God, but I don't have an hour. Sometimes I don't even have 5 minutes to spend on those prayers. So I really appreciate the fact that we have people who will pray and do pray and can take the time to pray. And we all need to do better, right? But, so I really appreciate the fact that we have people like that. And I would like my dad to be able to realize that God does love him. He's not punishing my dad. He's not just trying to make my dad suffer. My dad doesn't just have to endure until he dies. He can still do stuff, even if he can only pray. Is that the right mindset? I mean, what on earth do we do that's more important than prayer? I mean, I can't really think of much. Can you? Is this a rhetorical question? I don't know. Is there anything more important that we can do than pray? Okay. So the most important thing that we can do, my dad still has. My dad doesn't even have the pain. I kept asking, like, is he in pain? Because he was so upset, and what? My mom's like, no. I asked it like 5 times because I've never seen my dad like that. And I'm like, if you're in pain, I get it, because the pain can rob your concentration and it's hard. But if you're not crippled with pain to where you cannot even think, you can pray. If you got your mind and you're not crippled with pain. I know Jimmy has a lot of pain, but God gives him some grace, and so Jimmy can pray when he's not crippled in pain. And I'm sure he does. So yeah, we will all have hard times. And so I would very strongly discourage you from asking why. I would encourage you to pray. And if you find yourself being angry or frustrated, then I would tell you to ask yourself the question, do I trust God? And then depending on your answer, you know where to go. If you don't trust God, well, figure out why, fix it. If you do trust God, then stop complaining and use what energy you have to do what you can for God. So, and I give you permission to come see me in the hospital and tell me, do you trust God? Okay? Yes?
Don't pray. I can tell you from experience, your emotions will take over.
Yeah,
And that's a weak point in all of us.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my dad is struggling with anger and sorrow. I've never seen him so angry. I've never seen him so sad. Super difficult to see and confusing, honestly. Yeah. And to be quite honest, even praying the way we might do sometimes, which is like, God help me, there's nothing wrong with that prayer. But it's important to do the whole, prayer room prayer. Get down on your knees. Get somewhere quiet and get down on your knees and pray to God. It's not required to do those things, but you need to develop this communication line with God. And sometimes that takes more time and energy than just your quick little, back and forth prayers to help you do something or help you with this or whatever. I would equate it to my relationship with my wife. I see my wife every day. We talk. Sometimes we disagree on things, but we try to make time for each other to make sure that our relationship stays strong so that we don't get divorced after 25 years like my sister did. We need to spend time with God, but honestly, sometimes we don't like to because we don't want to face that. So it can be very hard. We know what we need to do and we don't want to do it. We're angry with God sometimes. Or we're hurt because we don't understand why we have to suffer. And it's definitely not easy. This is not easy to do. And maybe I'm taking the wrong message away from this stuff, but the lessons that I take are Be thankful for what you have, what you still have, not the least of which is your salvation. And do you trust God? Because if you do, then you don't have to understand. My children don't. They don't need to know how long it's going to take to get to Colorado Springs. They don't need to know where we're stopping that night. Sometimes they're annoying and they ask, but they generally trust me to get them there because I will take care of them. So God will take care of us. None of this was a lecture to anybody. This was, to me, this was something that I hope that I can apply in my life going forward. So thank you for your patience and attention, and we're dismissed.